Hello, and welcome to Read the World. My name is Derek Main, and I review translated literature. I actually may eventually change that little tag there, translated literature. I review translated literature. I've kind of gone over my reasons. It's 9% of what I read, and it's where I think the best contemporary literature is coming out of. And also, there's not a lot of it, on BookTube, any sort of literary social media. Most of the hype for it is pushed by booksellers, independent booksellers, and not so much kind of the social readers that do this kind of thing. So I thought there was a niche, to fill, and not to say there's none of that, because we'll talk actually about the one who I think does it best here in a minute. But so that's just my vibe, right? And I feel like Read the World encapsulates that. But I do also read and might want to start to review some really interesting independent presses, because and this is no offense at all to some of the ones Coffee House or Grey Wolf, but I'm not talking about that independent. Like I'm talking more closer to chapbook. I mean, not at that level, but because it's professional and IBS and all that, but it is closer to that ethos than it is a donor or grant type situation. I love those as well. And the reasoning is I just don't feel that they get much, if any, attention in these sort of spaces. And since it's something I'm interested in, and people are always kind of looking for something they haven't heard of, I think that is something I might do a little bit of. So anyway, at some point I'll have to change the tagline. It's the long and short of that, as 1 out of every 10 might actually be an English language review. Before I get started today, I said I was going to talk briefly about who is the best of it. So my inspiration, one of my big inspirations in doing this is Michael Kitto at Knowledge Lost. And if you're not aware, on his channel at Knowledge Lost, for I believe the 4 Sundays, we've been doing these live video vlogs. So we've done one on book collecting, we've done one on, our last one was on podcasts, literary podcasts, and some others as well thrown in, because it turned out we had very different taste. What else did we talk about? We talked about, the BookTube, basically, social media, literary type stuff. We had some, really great conversations. Well, he has a podcast, Lost in Translations, that I love a lot, and I've been lucky enough to be on a couple times, and then of course his BookTube channel, and runs a newsletter and blog, all dedicated to translations. And I really love that Michael has, and the thing I was first drawn to before I created any content, was he takes literature seriously but has an awesome sense of humor. So he brings both elements to bear when he discusses literature. And I always really appreciate that, because it's an understanding that this is a form of entertainment. There is a level of seriousness that you should take it, because it's the work, right? But at the same time, it's fun, and it should be fun. And I always really like that about Michael's reviews. So I said all that because there is some sad news right now, and if you go on to his Twitter handle, his wife lovingly and thankfully updated us, but he is in the hospital right now. They have found an abscess on his brain, and he is having, before they can do the surgery to remove that, which I believe stemmed from a sinus or inner ear infection. That's how the fluid, the pus, and the abscess was created. This is, again, my understanding from her updates. Before they do that, they need his blood to clot, which is not happening at the current moment as of this filming on Thursday. So he is in for a long road, and this is a very tough thing, a very hard thing. And I am someone across the globe that is lucky enough to just recently have become friends with Michael, and I'm just thinking of him. I'm sending my good vibes. I am a little distracted because within this world, he's very important to me personally. And I know that is the case for a lot of you, because if you watch my channel, the odds that you watch his are fairly high. I think we're 2 of the very few that focus on this specific work. So I'm hoping that Michael is going to watch this in a couple days or in a couple weeks, whenever he is on the mend and feeling better. And I know that he has already read the book that I reviewed today. So I am hopeful that he watches this and hates my review and says that I got everything wrong. That's what I want. Whatever you do, if you pray, if you do vibes, thoughts, please send it his way. So today's review is fittingly enough, because Michael and I's first podcast that we did together was on the BTABAs, the Best Translated Book Award here in America, and they have a huge long list. So I have a long list reaction video. And they also did a podcast with Michael where we reacted with it together, because he had actually read a lot more than me. Surprise, surprise. Fittingly, today's review is one of the shortlist finalists, 77. By Guillermo Saccomanno, translated from the Spanish by Andrea Labinger. This was the winner of the 2008 Hammett Prize, and it is from Open Letter. So, fittingly, I'm heading into this. So I've mentioned this, but when the long list came out, there were 3 titles that I had heard of. One of them I actually had not heard of, but that they introduced me to through being on the long list, where I immediately went out and bought and was like, okay, I want to read these. Now, I had read some other ones on there, and in fact, Die My Love, which I still think is the favorite to win, made the short list. Well, of the 3 I bought, 2 of the 3 made the short list, which is awesome. The one that didn't, Tentacle, I've already reviewed. 77 I'm reviewing now, and then my next review is Good Will Come from the Sea by Christos Ikemonou. Sorry, I have not practiced that yet. Translated from the Greek by Karen Emmerich, and you can tell because of this book that it's an archipelago book. So that's my next review, and since the BTBA finalist winner is being announced next week, I hope to actually get to that before then, so that I can kind of finish up my reviews of that work. So, fittingly today, we've got 77. Now, 77 is in structure and stuff kind of a noir, okay? So it is about the titular year, 77, in Buenos Aires. The new dictator is there, and we are going to follow Gomez, who is a middle-aged school teacher, middle class, and he is Peronian, so he's certainly against the new dictator. But he has this comfortable-ish existence there. And I have described it as he has one foot in both worlds in a sense, okay? So at night he goes wandering. He is a gay man, again a high school English teacher, and he is sympathetic and in fact would want to help and tries to help some of the younger, more revolutionary, obviously anti-dictatorial elements, people within this world. And that's kind of his evening vibe, right? He also goes out at night and wanders the evening looking for sex, angry sex, lost sex, desperate sex, terror sex. I mean, it's one of the ways that I think he is dealing with the terror of this regime. But anyway, so he's got his one foot in that kind of revolutionary world, primarily through his students. And then he's got this other foot in, well, I mean, he's dating a cop, for instance, Walter, who would arrest one of those revolutionaries in a heartbeat. And that is kind of the straight world, or it's not like he's in the world of the regime, but he is in this kind of more rule-following, element. And it's very interesting to see a regime coming in here with so much force and someone being on both ends of that. So this is really personally very interesting to me because I am firmly in the middle class, and I am a white male American in the middle class, which means that the systems that are in place benefit me. They benefit me tremendously. And the sort of pain that we foster upon other people to keep the traditional power systems in place, again, benefit me. And that is something that I think you do have to acknowledge if you are going to be against something, particularly if you were in an in group. And so it was really interesting for Gomez to be someone who is in an in group and how he relates in both worlds, just on a personal reader level. Like, I found that very interesting and could relate, I think, to Gomez in a lot of ways. So let's get into the work. I should say, I think this is a tremendous work. I actually think it's a worthy winner of the BTBA were it to win. But it is much more of a propulsive, mystery, kind of fun work, honestly, that you don't typically think is prize winning. I know it, won the 2008 Hammett Prize, but I think that prize is more suited for that, right? But these kind of literary prizes typically don't reward that kind of work, so I'd be pleasantly surprised if it did. I still think Die My Love is the favorite. I still think it has the momentum, and I think it is extremely worthy. But this wouldn't shock me, actually, just because this is high quality. And so let's get into some reading and a little bit of why, okay? The first thing I want to talk about is there's a narrative structure. It's first person throughout, with Gomez narrating it. But then very briefly at times, maybe about 8 times throughout the text, something odd happens. I didn't notice it until about midway through because it's so subtle, but it becomes third person. And then we see there's this other narrator who is commenting very quickly on Gomez, and then it goes right back into the first person Gomez's account. It's like that person then has access, right, to his internal dialogue and is then able to do the first person account. The reason that's interesting is it sets up, once you see that it's happening, a very terrible gut in your stomach, because you wonder if Gomez is dead or alive. And there's really no reason structurally for these few moments for some other narrator who's not named or anything like that to be going into third person. I mean, the whole thing is in first person narrative. So that's a structural trick that's done by the author that adds to this creeping sense of terror. And I think that was really effective, clever. I loved it. The first thing we're going to go to is how they took the student away, Esteban. So one of his students gets taken away, and that sets in motion Gomez's path in that other world, okay? Because he sees firsthand that this regime is disappearing people. I want to briefly go to page 40 and give you this description of how they took him away. The cops jumped him. They forced his mouth open. They beat him with the butts of their weapons, dragged him across the schoolyard. His blood stained the tiles. That's how they took him away. Powerful writing, and that's 5 sentences, and there's an entire book of that. Really good. All right. Page 3, page 151. I think all of us readers right now, no matter what we're reading, are looking for little clues as to our current existence, because our current existence is surreal. We're in quarantine, we're in stay at home, and it's worldwide. Well, one of the ways that it's surreal, and you'll hear lots of people comment on this, is time, okay, and the nature of time. Well, Saccomanno actually has a really interesting 2-sentence thing here on 151 about the way time works in a period of terror. And I really liked it, and I also thought it was apropos for today. When was all this, I asked. It doesn't matter anymore when it was, Gomez. There's no more wind. All the winds have died. That's incredible. And I think a lot of people might feel that way today. We're not under the same, I was just going to say we're not under the same regime that is disappearing people, although I'm not entirely sure that's not correct and wasn't even before COVID-19. But we're not under the same circumstances, okay? Let's not exaggerate that aspect of it politically. But we certainly are under a type of terror, right? And it's worldwide, and all the winds, like, where do they go? Well, what does time matter? Well, until there is a healing and until there is some sort of next thing, time truly doesn't matter. And I think that's the way that these people feel as they are in the clutches, the grips of the regime. So the next part I'm going to read is my favorite part of the whole novel. This is from page 62, and Saccomanno, the writer, is going to go in on the Argentine literary establishment in a way that I found fascinating. I want to learn more about what is fiction, what is nonfiction in this quick little diatribe, and it is going to head on face the way that you might react when you are amidst tyranny. In a sinister but humorous way, the Argentine Society of Authors was known as LaSad, feminizing the divine marquis. In this concentration camp nation, LaSad was a gathering place for the mediocre thugs who backed military coups and the persecution of workers. 1 year before, I remember, during the coup, Ratti, the president of LaSad, together with Borges, Ernesto Sabato, and the priest Castellania, accepted a luncheon invitation from the dictator Vidalia. At the meal, I recall, the only one who had the guts to mention Geraldo Conti among so many authors who had been disappeared was the priest, Castellani. As they left the luncheon, the press was waiting for them. Borges and Sabato, I recall, fell all over themselves in praise of the dictator. A gentleman, they called him. 1 year later, a year in which the events I'm telling you about took place, Walsh and Osterheld disappeared. Walsh, before exchanging fire with the task force, had a daughter in combat, and his granddaughter had been kidnapped by the army. Even crueler was the case of Osterheld. 4 daughters and their partners assassinated, his grandchildren kidnapped. Meanwhile, Victoria Ocampo was proudly admitted to the Argentine Academy of Letters with a so-called feminist speech that made no mention of the mothers who clamored for their children in front of the Casa Rosada. That is powerful stuff. What does the literary elite do during a time like this? I mean, we have Borges, Sabato, and Ocampo, like the 3 beacons of Argentine literature, and they're just thrown out there, just tossed, dismissed, not their work, but something more important than their work, maybe? Is that part of what Saccomanno is saying? Like I said, I shouldn't talk too much about this because I have not looked into the fiction or non-fiction of those events or whatnot. But within the work of this, within the work of 77, it is a trouncing. And I love that part. The last section I'm going to read on, page 166, is something like his middle classness that I feel a kinship with. And this is going to do, I have to set it up just a teensy bit. Diana is someone that he houses for a bit. She's a revolutionary young former student. And she he finds some letters of hers that she's left behind, and these letters are to a lover, another woman whose name I can't remember now, but it's also a fellow revolutionary these letters are to. So these letters are romantic, but they are also about the revolution, and he is going to Gomez is now going to read these letters. The fact that Diana had lugged these letters around all that time revealed the density of her feelings. And the fact that, while the sound of a siren, the reverberation of gunshots, frightened screams rose from the street, I stayed indoors, reading the tragedy of those two like the echo of a 19th century serial novel, says less about the 2 girls than about me. Even though I might have read those letters like a serial novel, it didn't escape me that the novelization of their romance was more real than my analysis of the text as fictional fabric. They had lived the novel. I, on the other hand, was reading it. That is, my obsession was literature, a second-hand experience. I was not alive in 77, never been to Buenos Aires, so I can only read it as a second-hand experience. I think there is value in that. But in the moment, Gomez talks about, he is there. You know, he did live in 77, Gomez, and he was in Buenos Aires, and he saw the terror, and he watched Esteban disappear, and and he's still treated as literature. I think he still feels the weight of that guilt in many ways, and that is the most powerful part of the story to me. And I loved this book. All right. Once again, before I sign off, please, good vibes, prayers, thoughts, whatever you do, to Michael Kiddo at Knowledge Lost. He means a lot to this community. All right. Be good to folks.